Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. Today we're tackling something that might seem pretty basic at first glance. Play.
Play.
Yeah, but we're going deeper than just, kids having fun. We're really exploring the role of play in supporting children's mental health.
And it's a fascinating connection. There's so much research now highlighting just how crucial play is for building strong mental health in those early years.
Exactly.
Hmm.
When I was prepping for this, I kept coming across this idea that play isn't just a way to pass the time. It's like this key ingredient.
It really is. Through play, children can develop those all-important cooking skills. They start to learn how to navigate those tricky relationships and build a sense of self-confidence.
It's like a mental gym for them.
I love that. A mental gym where they're working out those emotional muscles, getting strong and ready to face whatever life throws their way.
And that's especially relevant these days, right?
Yeah.
Because it seems like we're seeing this decline in unstructured play happening at the same time as this rise in childhood mental health concerns.
It's a trend we can't ignore. The CDC even reports that 1 in 6 children has been diagnosed with some kind of mental, behavioral, or developmental disorder.
Wow, 1 in 6. That's pretty alarming.
It is, and while there are likely multiple factors at play here, the lack of unstructured play could certainly be a contributing factor.
Okay, so before we go any further, I think it's important to clarify some terms.
Yeah.
You mentioned structured versus unstructured play. Can you break those down for us?
Absolutely. So structured play is basically adult-led. It has rules. Goals often involve specific instructions. Think organized sports music lessons, even a craft activity with step-by-step directions.
Got it. So it's more about guided learning and skill development.
Exactly. Whereas unstructured play is all about freedom. It's child-directed, driven by their own curiosity and imagination.
So like building a fort out of blankets, having an imaginary tea party, running around the playground, making up games as they go.
Exactly. And it's in those moments of unstructured play that children are really constructing their mental world, as Jean Piaget, the famous child psychologist, put it.
Hold on, let's pause on Piaget for a second. I know his work is super relevant here, but for those who might not be familiar, can you give us a little context?
Of course, Piaget believed that children go through these distinct stages of cognitive development, and play, particularly that unstructured kind, is how they make sense of their experiences and build those crucial cognitive skills.
So it's not just aimless fun, it's actually driving their learning and development.
Exactly. He emphasized how the period between birth and 8 years old is so critical for brain development. That's when all those neural connections are forming rapidly, and play provides the perfect stimulation for that growth.
Wow, so we're not just keeping them busy, we're actually wiring their brains for the better.
Exactly. And when we look at the benefits of unstructured play, specifically for mental health, it becomes clear that it goes way beyond just letting kids blow off steam.
So true. One of the things that really jumped out at me in the research was the link between unstructured play and reduced bullying. Can you talk about that? It seems a bit counterintuitive at first.
It does, doesn't it? But think about it. When children engage in pretend play, especially scenarios involving conflict, they're actually practicing crucial social skills.
Like empathy, perspective taking, conflict resolution.
Exactly. They're learning to step into someone else's shoes, to negotiate and find peaceful solutions. All of those skills are key to preventing bullying.
It's like they're getting a crash course in emotional intelligence through play.
Right, and it doesn't stop there. Unstructured play gives children a safe space to explore and manage a whole range of emotions. Anger, frustration, joy, sadness, you name it.
It's like a training ground for building those emotional regulation skills. And those are essential not just in childhood, but throughout life, right?
Absolutely. Learning to deal with those big feelings in a healthy way, that's fundamental for their mental well-being.
And that ability to regulate emotions ties back to something else you mentioned earlier, resilience. Can you
Yeah.
unpack that a bit more?
Resilience is all about bouncing back from setbacks, coping with challenges, adapting to change. And you know what? Unstructured play is like a boot camp for resilience.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How so?
Think about it. When children are engaged in unstructured play, they're constantly facing little challenges. They're making decisions, solving problems. They might even experience mini failures.
Like their block tower falling over or their imaginary friend moving away.
Exactly. And those experiences, as small as they may seem, are teaching them valuable lessons about perseverance, adaptability, problem solving.
They're building that mental toughness through play without even realizing it.
Precisely. It's like they're creating these neural pathways in their brains, making them more adaptable and resilient in the face of future challenges.
This is incredible. And what's really encouraging is that organizations like the Canadian Public Health Association are starting to recognize unstructured play as a fundamental right for children. a key component of their overall well-being.
It's a shift in understanding. It's not just a nice to have, it's essential.
And it's not just anecdotal evidence either. There's real research backing this up.
Absolutely. Studies are showing a direct link between unstructured play and improved social skills, emotional regulation, problem-solving abilities, even academic performance.
Wow, so it's impacting not just their mental health, but their overall development and success in life.
Exactly. It's a holistic benefit.
This is where things get really interesting for me. The concept of play as therapy. I've seen it with my own kids. They'll act out scenarios with their toys,
Mhm.
like replaying an argument they witnessed or expressing feelings they couldn't put into words.
That's a great point. Play is a natural language for children. It's how they communicate, process emotions, make sense of the world. It's so powerful that child psychologists use play therapy as a tool.
Can you tell us more about what play therapy looks like?
It's essentially using play to help children express and work through difficult emotions or experiences. The therapist provides a safe and supportive environment where the child can use toys, art materials, even their own body, to communicate and process what's happening inside.
So it's not about sitting down for a traditional talk therapy session. It's about letting them express themselves through play.
Exactly. And through those playful interactions, the therapist can gain insights into the child's inner world and help them develop coping skills and emotional regulation.
It's amazing how something as simple as play can be so transformative.
It really is. And it's important to remember that this therapeutic aspect of play isn't limited to formal settings. Even in everyday play, children are exploring their feelings, trying out different roles, practicing coping
Like
mechanisms.
they're rehearsing for life's challenges in the safety of their play world.
Exactly. And the more opportunities we give them to engage in this type of play, the more equipped they'll be to handle whatever life throws their way.
Speaking of equipping them, let's dive into the science behind all this. How does unstructured play actually work its magic on those developing brains?
One key area is executive functioning. Those are like the brain's control center, managing things like planning, focusing, remembering, controlling impulses.
So basically the skills we need to function effectively in pretty much every aspect of life.
Exactly. And unstructured play is the perfect training ground for those skills to develop. Children are constantly making decisions, solving problems, adapting to changing circumstances, controlling their impulses.
A mental workout disguised as fun.
Precisely. Research has shown that the more children engage in unstructured play, the stronger their executive functioning skills become. There was even this fascinating study from the University of Colorado that found a direct link between unstructured play and improved self-directed control.
So the more they get to lead their own play experiences, the better they become at regulating their own behavior and making choices. That's incredible.
It makes sense, right? It's about fostering that sense of agency and ownership over their actions, which is so important for their self-confidence and that sense of mastery over their world.
All of this is so enlightening, but I'm sure a lot of parents and educators listening are thinking, because this sounds great, but how do we actually make this happen? How do we create an environment that fosters this kind of play?
That's a great question and something we'll be digging into more deeply in the next part of our deep dive. But the good news is that creating an environment for unstructured play isn't about having all the fancy toys or coming up with elaborate activities. It's more about setting the stage and then stepping back to let the magic unfold.
So it's not about being the entertainer or the play director. It's about being a facilitator, giving them the tools and space, and then trusting them to build their own play worlds.
Exactly. Providing that foundation and then letting their imaginations take over. We'll talk about specific strategies next time, but the key is to remember that simplicity often reigns supreme when it comes to unstructured play.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation already. It's clear that we need to reframe our thinking about play. It's not just a way to pass the time. It's an investment in building strong, resilient kids.
Couldn't agree more. It's an investment in their present happiness and their future well-being. We hear so much about the importance of early literacy and numeracy, but play deserves a place right up there with those foundational skills.
It really does. It's like play is the secret ingredient for unlocking their full potential mentally and emotionally.
Exactly. And the best part is that it's accessible to everyone. It doesn't require expensive toys or special programs. It simply requires our time, our attention, and a willingness to let go of control and embrace the power of play.
Beautifully said. Now, before we move on to part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll explore specific tips for fostering unstructured play, I want to leave our listeners with a question to think about. What are some ways you can create more opportunities for the children in your life to engage in this kind of play? Even small changes to their environment or your approach can make a big difference.
That's a great question to reflect on. Remember, even small shifts can have a ripple effect. Join us next time as we delve deeper into practical strategies for creating that play-rich environment.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the amazing world of play. Picking up right where we left off, we're going to be exploring how play shapes children's mental health.
And today we're focusing on a type of play that can be incredibly beneficial for kids of all ages and abilities. Sensory play.
When you think about it, children experience the world through their senses. That's how they learn how they make sense of everything around them.
Absolutely. And sensory play provides these rich, engaging experiences that can help them develop their sensory processing abilities, which is so crucial for their overall well-being, especially their mental and emotional health.
Okay, let's break this down a bit. For those listening who might not be familiar with the concept, what exactly do we mean by sensory play?
Sensory play is any activity that stimulates a child's senses. Touch, sight, sound, smell, even taste. It's about giving them opportunities to really experience the world through those senses.
So we're talking about things like playing with sand and
Mhm.
water, finger painting, listening to music, or just exploring different textures out in nature.
Exactly. And it can be as simple or as elaborate as you like. You could set up a sensory bin filled with different materials like rice, beans, pasta, or you could have a water table with bubbles, toys, different size containers. The possibilities are endless.
And what I love about sensory play is how adaptable it is. You can tailor it to a child's specific interests and their developmental stage. Plus, you don't need any fancy equipment or expensive toys. You can use everyday materials found around the house or in nature.
Absolutely. It's all about encouraging that exploration and engagement with the world through those sensory experiences. And it's often most beneficial when it's child-led and open-ended.
There's that concept of unstructured play again, which we talked about in part one. Sensory play just seems to naturally lend itself to that freedom of exploration.
It really does. When children are engaged in sensory play, we want to encourage them to take the lead experiment, discover, express themselves in their own unique ways.
So rather than setting up a structured activity with step-by-step instructions,
hmm
we're creating a space for them to just explore those sensory materials however they choose.
Exactly. It's about creating that space for experimentation, creativity, self-expression. It's amazing to witness how engrossed children can become in sensory play. It's like they enter this whole other world of exploration and discovery.
I definitely seen that with my own kids. They get completely lost in the moment, fully immersed in those sensory experiences.
It's captivating. And while it might look like they're just having fun, there's a lot of learning and development happening beneath the surface.
Okay, so let's talk about those benefits. We've already established that play is crucial for children's mental health. But what specifically does sensory play bring to the table?
One of the key benefits is that it helps develop their sensory processing abilities. And those abilities are essential for helping them regulate their emotions and behaviors.
Can you explain what you mean by sensory processing? I think some people listening might not be familiar with that term.
Of course, sensory processing is basically our brain's ability to take in information from our senses, make sense of it, and then respond appropriately. It's how we interpret and react to the world around us through touch, sight, sound, smell, and taste.
So it's how we filter and organize all that sensory input we're constantly being bombarded with.
Exactly. And for some children, this process can be a bit more challenging. They might be overly sensitive to certain sensations or under-responsive to others. For example, some kids might find loud noises really overwhelming, while others might crave intense movement or pressure.
That makes sense. So sensory play can help those children who might be overstimulated or understimulated by certain sensations learn to manage those inputs more effectively.
Precisely. Through sensory play, children can experiment with different sensations at their own pace and in a safe environment. It helps them develop strategies for managing those sensory inputs in a way that feels good to their bodies and their brains.
It's like they're learning to regulate their own sensory systems through play, finding that sweet spot where they feel comfortable and in control.
Exactly. And when children feel more regulated and in control of their sensory experiences, it can have this ripple effect on their overall well-being.
It makes sense.
Mm,
If you're not constantly being bombarded by overwhelming sensations or struggling to get the sensory input you need, you're going to be better able to focus, engage, and just feel calm and grounded.
absolutely. It can lead to improvements in their mood, their behavior, even their sleep patterns.
So sensory play isn't just about having fun and exploring their senses. It's actually laying the groundwork for emotional regulation and self-control.
Precisely. And beyond emotional regulation, sensory play also helps develop other important cognitive skills, like problem solving, creativity, language development.
I can see how that would be the case. When they're experimenting with different materials, figuring out how things work, or even just describing their sensory experiences, they're stretching those cognitive muscles.
Exactly. And sensory play often naturally involves social interaction, too, which is crucial for developing those all-important social and emotional skills.
Absolutely. Whether they're playing alongside others, sharing materials, or collaborating on some kind of sensory creation, they're learning about cooperation, communication, empathy.
Exactly. And for children who might struggle in more traditional social settings, sensory play can offer this more comfortable and engaging way to connect with others.
It's like it creates this common ground for interaction and shared experience where they can connect through those sensory explorations.
Precisely. Now, let's not forget about the therapeutic potential of sensory play. We touched on how play can be therapeutic in part one, but how does that apply specifically to sensory play?
That's a great question. I've seen firsthand how sensory play can be a powerful tool for my own kids to process big emotions. Like when my son is feeling frustrated, he loves to pound on Play-Doh or dig his hands into a bin of kinetic sand. It seems to really help him release that pent-up energy and calm down.
That's a great example. Sensory play can provide this safe and contained environment for children to express and regulate their emotions. It gives them a physical outlet for those big feelings, whether it's anger, anxiety, sadness, even excitement.
So if a child is feeling overwhelmed or overstimulated, sensory play can help bring them back down to a calmer state. And if they're feeling withdrawn or sluggish, it can give them that extra stimulation to kind of bring them out of their shell.
Exactly. Those sensory experiences can help children self-soothe and regulate their arousal levels. And that's especially important for children who may have experienced trauma or who have sensory processing challenges.
It's like it gives them a sense of control over their bodies and their environment, which can be so empowering,
Ah,
especially for children who've experienced situations where they felt powerless.
absolutely. And beyond emotional regulation, sensory play can also be used to help children process and integrate those more difficult experiences.
So, for example, a child who's experienced a loss might create a memory box filled with objects that represent their loved one, incorporating different textures and scents to evoke those memories.
Exactly. Or a child who has been through a medical procedure might use dolls or medical play kits to reenact and make sense of that experience, using sensory materials to represent different parts of the process or the emotions involved.
It's like they're using those sensory materials to tell their stories and work through those complex emotions in a way that feels safe and manageable.
Precisely. And by doing so, they're building resilience, developing coping mechanisms, ultimately fostering their mental and emotional well-being.
This is also fascinating. It's really making me rethink the way I view play and its importance in a child's life. It's not just about keeping them entertained, it's about giving them the tools they need to navigate the world and thrive.
I couldn't agree more. And the beauty of sensory play is that it's something we can so easily incorporate into our daily lives. It doesn't require special training or fancy equipment. It just requires a shifting perspective and a willingness to embrace the power of play.
Before we move on to part three, where we'll explore some practical tips for incorporating sensory play into a child's routine, I want to leave our listeners with a little challenge. What are some simple ways you can introduce more sensory play into the day for the children in your life? It could be as simple as setting up a water table, creating a sensory bin with household items, or even going for a nature walk and encouraging them to explore different textures and scents.
That's a great challenge. And remember, it's not about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about being present, being curious, and being open to the possibilities of play.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into play and its incredible impact on children's mental health.
It's been quite the journey, hasn't it? We've explored the power of unstructured play, delved into those sensory experiences, uncovered so many benefits for children's development.
It really has. And we've learned how these types of play can help children build those essential skills, regulate their emotions, and develop resilience. But now let's shift gears a little bit. We've covered the what and the why of play, but what about the how?
You're right. It's one thing to understand the theory, but putting it all into practice can sometimes feel like a whole other challenge.
Exactly. So how do we do it?
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge that there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Every child is unique with their
Mhm.
own needs, interests, and play styles.
So true. What works for one child might not work for another. It's about being attuned to those individual differences and adapting our approach accordingly.
Exactly. But there are some general principles and strategies that can help us create those environments where children's play can really flourish.
Okay, I like that. So let's dig into those principles. What are some key things we can do as parents, caregivers, and educators to really foster a playful spirit in the children in our lives?
I think it starts with a fundamental shift in mindset. We need to recognize that play is not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's
Ah,
not just something to fill the time or entertain children. It's essential for their development and well-being.
it's like recognizing that play is their work,
Yeah.
their language, their way of making sense of the world.
Precisely. And it's not something that should be relegated to specific times or spaces. We can find opportunities for play throughout the day in all sorts of environments. It's about weaving playfulness into the fabric of their lives.
I love that. It's about finding those little moments to inject some play into those everyday routines, like turning cleaning up into a game or using bath time for sensory exploration.
Exactly. And it might mean being a bit more flexible with our schedules and routines, allowing for those spontaneous bursts of playfulness to emerge. Children often have a way of reminding us that sometimes the best things in life are unscheduled.
That is so true. And beyond our mindset and our approach to time, we can also be intentional about creating environments that invite play.
Mhm.
That might involve providing access to open-ended toys and materials, setting up inviting play spaces, and even incorporating play into those everyday activities.
Absolutely. When you think about the toys and materials you offer, choose open-ended toys, things like blocks, dolls, art supplies, natural materials. Those spark imagination and encourage creativity so much more than toys that have just one function or predetermined outcome.
It's about giving them the tools to build their own worlds, rather than handing them a prepackaged experience.
Exactly. And when it comes to creating play spaces, think about incorporating different textures, colors, levels. A cozy corner with soft blankets and pillows can become a reading nook or a puppet theater. A large cardboard box can be transformed into a spaceship, a castle, a store. The possibilities are truly endless. It's all about their imagination.
And what I love about those kinds of play spaces is that they can be easily adapted as children's interests change and evolve.
Absolutely. And don't forget about incorporating play into those everyday activities. Cooking together can become a science experiment. Cleaning up can be a race against the clock. Even a trip to the grocery store can be an opportunity for imaginative play. It's about finding those little moments to spark joy and wonder in the mundane.
I think one of the most powerful things we can do as adults is to model playfulness ourselves. Children are like sponges. They're soaking up our attitudes and behaviors. If we approach play with that sense of joy, curiosity, and openness, they're more likely to do the same.
I completely agree. Our own energy and enthusiasm for play can be contagious. And it's important to remember that play is not about perfection or achievement. It's about the process, the exploration, the experimentation, letting go of those adult expectations and allowing children to simply be in the moment, enjoying the experience for what it is.
It's about celebrating that journey, not just the destination. And sometimes that journey involves a bit of mess and chaos.
Absolutely. Mess and chaos are often signs of creativity, exploration, and learning in action. Embrace that mess as a sign of a playful spirit at work.
So rather than stressing about keeping everything perfectly clean, we should embrace the opportunity to let loose and get a little messy ourselves.
Exactly. And while it's important to provide a safe and supportive space for that mess to unfold, it's equally important to resist the urge to over-control or direct their play. Let them take the lead, follow their own interests, make their own discoveries.
Now, I know we've talked a lot about resisting that urge to intervene, but are there times when it's appropriate to step in and guide their play a little bit?
Of course. Our role as adults is to ensure their safety and well-being, and to provide guidance and support when needed. If there's a conflict, a safety concern, or a child who's struggling to engage, we can step in with sensitivity and care.
So it's about finding that balance between giving them the space to explore independently and being there to offer a helping hand or a gentle nudge when needed.
Exactly. And I think it's important to emphasize that supporting children's play doesn't have to be a chore. It can actually be a joyful and rewarding experience for adults as well. When we tap into that playful spirit within ourselves, it can bring a sense of lightness, connection, even creativity to our own lives.
It's like we're rediscovering the joy of play through their eyes, reconnecting with that sense of wonder and possibility that we might have lost touch with as adults.
Precisely. And by doing so, we're not only supporting their development, but we're nurturing our own well-being. It's a win-win for everyone involved.
It's a beautiful reminder that play is not just for children. It's a fundamental human need that benefits us throughout our lives.
I couldn't agree more. Play is a gift, one that we should cherish and cultivate throughout our lives.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of play, what's the one key takeaway you hope our listeners will remember?
That play is not just some frivolous activity. It's a powerful force that shapes children's lives in such profound ways. It's an investment in their mental, emotional, and social well-being, and something that we can all nurture and support, both in the children we know and love and in ourselves.
Beautifully said.
Hmm.
And I hope our deep dive has inspired all of you listening to embrace play, to see it not just as child's play, but as a vital ingredient for a happy, healthy, and fulfilling life. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey of exploration and discovery. Until next time, keep playing, keep exploring, and keep nurturing that playful spirit within you. And remember, sometimes those most profound lessons are learned through the simplest acts of play.